Write the decimal as a fraction. The place values help us identify what the denominators are. So if it has one decimal spot, we need it over 10. And if it has two decimal spots, we're going to place it over 100. This is 1 and a 3. You could also write it as 1 whole and 3/10. Go ahead and write the decimals as fractions for problems 1, 2, 4, and 5. Use the following numbers to make a true number sentence. Use each number only once. Let's see if I used 100 in the denominator, then I can't use it again. I can turn a 100 into a 20 pretty easily by dividing by 5. So if I'm thinking about equivalent fractions, 100 divided by 5 is 20. What numbers could I place on the top that would give me an equivalent fraction? Well, 15 divided by 5 is 3. So these are equivalent fractions. This is just the reduced version of this fraction. Choose all that apply. Choose all the equations that represent the following statements. P% of 80 is 28. So P is the percent. Percents are out of 100. So in this case, the percent is P% of 80 is 28. That means 80 is the whole, and 28 would be the part. I see 28 over 80 here, and P over 100 here, so A is true. Here I see 28 over 100 and P over 80. We can't just swap those around. That is not a true statement. But I could multiply both sides by 80, and then 80 divided by 80 would go away, and so I'd be left with 28 on the left and P over 100 times 80 on the other side. Here I see P over 100 times 80, and the other side is 28. So C is also correct. And D is the same as A. They've just replaced this side of the equation went to the right, and this side of the equation went to the left. So that one is also correct. Of 160 students, 65% ride the bus to school. How many students ride the bus to school? Right, and solve a proportion to determine the number of students who ride the bus to school. So again, part, whole, percent, 100. So the percent was 65. Out of 100 students would ride the bus to school. There are 165 or 160 students. That is the whole amount of students. And we are asked to determine how many ride the bus. That is the part. The solve piece, remember yesterday's lesson we cross multiplied and then divided. So 160 times 65 divided by 100 is 104 people that ride the bus. 104 students ride the bus. Then it says write an equation in the form y equals kx to determine the number of students who ride the bus to school. In earlier lessons in 7th grade, the k was used as the constant of proportionality, or the rate of these problems. The rate here is 65%, so we could write it as y equals 65 over 100x, or we can write the percent as a decimal. 65 over 100 is 0.65, just like we saw in our warm-up today. It's over 100, so this would be the tenths, hundredths place. And we're replacing the x value with the number of students. In our calculator, we're going to use 0.65 times 160, and that will tell us how many students ride the bus. So y comes out to 104 again. So x is all students, and y are the ones who ride the bus. How are the equations you wrote in part A and part B similar? Both equations use 65 over 100, or the decimal version of that value. Yu Yan's 72-ounce pitcher of punch is 80% fruit juice by volume. How many ounces of fruit juice are in the pitcher? Write and solve an equation in the form y equals kx. So if it's 80%, percent means per 100, and that is the same as 0.8 or 0.80. X is the whole amount of punch, and Y is the amount of fruit juice. We need to solve the equation. 72 is the whole juice. So we're replacing X with 72. 0.80 times 72 is 57.6, and this was measured in ounces. In part B, it asks us to use the proportion. So part whole percent 100. Here the percent is 80%. The whole juice has 72 ounces in it, or the whole punch has 72 ounces. Then we will cross multiply and divide by the number we haven't used yet. And that also comes out to 57.6 ounces of fruit juice. So these are just different versions of writing similar equations. Instead of using x and y, we're using w to represent the whole and p to represent the part. We've replaced x, the whole, with 72, and w, the whole, with 72. Of 600 students, 90 signed up to volunteer. What percent of students signed up to volunteer? Write and solve an equation in the form y equals kx. This time we know the whole, and we know the part, but we do not know the rate. So the whole is 600. We're still looking for the rate k, and the part was 90. Another way to write k times 600 is 600k. And the way we solve this equation, we have numbers here and variables here. So we're going to divide both sides by 600. That gives us k. And 90 divided by 600 is the decimal 0.15. Now let's find the proportion. The part here is 90. The whole is 600. Diagonally multiply and divide by the value we haven't used yet. 90 times 100 is 9,000. 9,000 divided by 600 is 15. So how come we got different answers? Well, this one is 15%, and this one is 15% written in its decimal version, but that is the same as 15%. It's just the other format for it. We have the decimal, the percent, and the fraction version of all of those are 15%. So they are equivalent to each other. They're just written in different formats. For problems 6 through 8, solve by using either a proportion or an equation in the form y equals kx. Explain why you selected that strategy. So here, Mrs. Kondo asked her students to check whether their calculators needed new batteries. Of 200 calculators, 30% of them needed new batteries. How many calculators needed new batteries? 30% as a decimal is 0.30. There were 200 calculators. Remember, x is the whole and y is the part. So there were 200 calculators in all. 0.3 times 200 is 60 that need new batteries. It asks us to explain why we selected that strategy. I selected this strategy because I was given the rate. And for me, changing it to a decimal and doing one multiplication is easier than writing two fractions and having to cross multiply and divide. In this one, I wasn't given the percent, so for this one, I will probably use the two fractions. Of the 72 trees Ethan planted, 18 trees produced fruit. So 18 is the part, 72 is the whole. Cross multiply and divide by 72. 18 times 100 is 1,800. Divide that by 72 gives us 25, so this is 25%. I selected the proportion version because I was not given a percentage. I didn't have to solve an equation for k. I just had to do some multiplication and division. Logan's family has driven 470.4 miles of their 840-mile road trip. What percent of the driving have they completed? So the part they have completed is 470.4. The whole trip is 840. And percents are always out of 100. Cross multiply. And divide by 840. They have completed 56%. That is all for lesson 4. Check back for future lessons.